Good evening and welcome to Seaweed Mania, Virtually Delicious Edition with Chef Evan Hennessey. My name is Eric Froberg. I'm an education specialist at New Hampshire Sea Grant, and I'll be moderating tonight's event. Tonight, we're lucky enough to have two experts on the topic of sourcing and cooking with seaweed. Evan Hennessey is the chef and owner of Stages Restaurant located in Dover, New Hampshire. Many of you may be familiar with him as a three-time champion of the Food Network's hit show Chopped. However, if you follow the food scene, you will also understand the depth of his experience, having worked with such chefs as Charlie Palmer, Ran Achatz, and Thomas Keller. Dr. Gabriela Bradt is a fisheries extension specialist with New Hampshire Sea Grant, and she's going to talk with us about the benefits of seaweed as a food source, as well as foraging for it. Before we go to our guests, let me explain tonight's format. As Evan and Gabby are doing their thing, please post any questions that you have using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I'll be monitoring the questions and asking them as Evan is cooking. We'll try to get as many as possible in. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge all the partners of tonight's event. In addition to New Hampshire Sea Grant, the event is supported by the Dover Public Library and, of course, Stages Restaurant. Maine Coast Sea Vegetables helped us in putting together seaweed grab bags that are now available to pick up in the children's room at the library. I'm now going to turn things over to Gabby.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Like Eric said, I'm Gabriela Bradt. I'm the Fisheries Extension Specialist from New Hampshire Sea Grant and UNH Cooperative Extension. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a brief history of the Seaweed Mania workshop series that grew out of a need as part of the outreach effort to support New Hampshire Sea Grant seaweed aquaculture efforts, and to begin to introduce to New Hampshire consumers everything about seaweeds, the fact that they are edible, they are nutritional powerhouses, and they have a lot of health benefits, and it's not just for sushi. So Seaweed Mania started in 2015. I just did some math and told Evan we've been doing this now for 6 years, which is pretty exciting. And it was a little serendipitous the way it started. Evan and I had done previous events together for fisheries and local seafood. And we got together and said, wouldn't it be great if we could come up with something that would help his idea of having a food lab at his restaurant Stages in Dover. And I said it would be great because I have this new idea to try and get people to know more about edible seaweeds and what we can do with it. And so that's how Seaweed Mania was born. And it has expanded over the years to include a similar in-person workshop, the way we've been doing it now, to what we did now. We've included other power foods such as chocolate and so on. And it's been a really, really fun experience. So a little bit about seaweed. Why did we want people to begin to eat it and know more about it instead of just for sushi? But primarily was to help develop markets for a burgeoning industry. In New England and actually in the United States, we're working on trying to develop and grow the aquaculture industry for seaweed. And New Hampshire Sea Grant is an integral part of that endeavor. And one of the things that you need to know is that seaweeds are pretty much the powerhouses in nutritional value of the sea. I call it vitamin C, not to be cheesy. And it really does have pretty much every macro and micronutrient that your body needs. And just for example, one of the kelps actually has pretty much all sodium, potassium, iodine, manganese, vitamin A, B1, B2, B3, vitamin C, vitamin E, all of those really good things for your body, amino acids, proteins, and so on. And we also wanted to dispel any sort of myth about how it would taste. And this is where Evan worked his magic and so on. seaweeds are also have been used for medicinal purposes. They have many other non-culinary uses. They're used in medicine, pharmaceuticals, personal care products. If anybody says they've never eaten seaweed, let me surprise you a little bit. You eat it in anything that needs sort of a stabilizing agent, such as beer and ice cream and yogurt, to name a few things. And we do have many edible seaweeds here in the coast of New Hampshire and New England, and it can be harvested and grown in an aquaculture setting, as well as foraged. And another reason why Evan and I partnered up on some of these Seaweed Mania, because it kind of fits in with some of the work that he does for his own restaurant. So since the Seaweed Mania series began, we have worked with other restaurants. We've expanded some of our outreach efforts into working with breweries. We've made several rounds of seaweed beer, including a kelp beer with Smutty Nose Brewery and the UNH Brew Lab. And we are also on the research end of things as well. So we not only grow the seaweed as part of our integrated multi-trophic aquaculture project, which grows mussels, seaweeds, and steelhead trout off of Newcastle. But we're also working on developing economic tools for interested seaweed farmers, and working with New Hampshire Fish and Game to figure out permitting and leasing sites and so on and so forth, as well as other sea grant programs around the country. And we also we're working on continuing to expand our Seaweed Mania series. We do have a foraging workshop, which is going to be virtual this year. We're working on that, but we do teach you how to identify 10 of the most commercially important seaweeds in New England, and how to do it and how to forage properly and safely. So with that, let's get to it. And thank you so much for joining us. And Evan, to you, please.
Hey guys, welcome to the Stages Kitchen. Gabby, happy anniversary. Can't believe we've been doing it for this amount of time. That's nuts. I'm glad you said that. But welcome to my home. We have a nice little fire going for you guys, and I've got two really cool, really flavorful dishes that I want to prepare for you. Thanks very much so, Maine Coast Sea Vegetables. Been working with these guys for a while. They have phenomenal product available all over the place, health food stores, some grocery stores in the area, but very specifically today, right here in the Stages Kitchen. So before we have a couple of things to get going, so I'm going to jump right into it. If you guys have questions, let me know. I'm excited to have you. So welcome. Let's get moving, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on a dashi broth. So Japanese in tradition, based on dried kombu. So we'll start that off because we need that to simmer before we get to our final dish. So working again with the Maine Coast Sea Vegetables, the dried kelp or kombu is what we know it as. We're going to establish a broth. So you've got beautiful dried seaweed right there, great flavor. Put this into here. Now the amount of this that goes in there, this is very you dependent. How strong do you want this to be? You can make very light dashi, light flavor, just put maybe one blade in there. I, on the other hand, like to go flavor heavy, flavor forward, and I like to put a bunch of it in there. So more the better. So we have that going in. And then from there, one of the other elements that I love to put into my dashi, these are smoked. You guys can kind of see these. I wish you could smell these. These are smoked mushrooms. They're shiitakes that have been dehydrated and then smoked. So we're going to put those in there as well. Simmer those away. Those will be great. And then the other thing I'm going to dump in is a combination of soy sauce, oyster sauce, right there. It's a nice sort of round out, give that beautiful umami flavor. And that's going to go onto the stove over here. We're just going to add some water to it. Now, again, the amount of water and the amount of ingredients and the mushrooms and all the other stuff that you add into it, this is where your taste and your flavor comes into play. This is based on mine, so we'd love for you to see what I have going on here, but yet adapt this to your ideas. So I just have some water nice and warm, so we put warm water directly onto the dried elements. And we're going to let it simmer while we're working on our next item. So the kitchen I have right here might look a little bit different from what you have at home, and also from a lot of other commercial kitchens. This is a 100% electric kitchen by design. There's no gas in here. Our carbon footprint is very, very small. Other than that, we have a campfire behind me, and that is how we do majority of our cooking. Way back in the corner there, I've got a thermal immersion circulator, and all that together equals what we put in on our plates. So from here, we're going to make some dumplings with kimchi, and then eventually we'll get to that broth over there. So nice little sort of rice paper wrappers right there. Little egg, mix that up, and that will help us seal these little dumplings. This is a negotiable ingredient right here. It can be done with egg. It can be done with a little bit of rice flour or rice starch and water. Cornstarch, same thing. This is another preference ingredient. I have some kimchi and a little bit of tofu. These are going to be the ingredients for our dumpling. Cut through this, nice firm tofu. And this is going to go into the bowl, the Forage. This will give a nice little sort of a good texture, nice creamy texture to the inside of the dumpling. Keep it almost as a binder, if you will, inside the dumpling. You can do this with your knife. You can squish it with your hands, put it in a food processor. Let's look. What we'll do is we have our kimchi here. I'm going to put that down on the cutting board and then chop that up. Again, like pretty finely for this because we're making dumplings, and we want to make sure that we can fill the dumpling, and it's not going to have a lot of large pieces of cabbage sticking out. You can already kind of like start to think about the flavors that we have going on here. Kimchi, nice spicy cabbage, a little bit of tofu, beautiful creaminess to it, and then over to the dashi, nice earthy, a little bit of funkiness, a little mushroom in there, a touch of smokiness because the mushrooms are smoked. So nice and quick for you. Again,
As Evan's chopping here, I'm going to jump in real quickly. We had a question come in about whether people will get information on the virtual foraging workshop. People who signed up later in this sign-up process had the option of checking a box whether they wanted to receive emails from us. If you signed up earlier on in the process, you didn't have that option. So if you're unsure about what your choice was, if you go to the New Hampshire Sea Grant webpage, there's an option of contacting us, and you can just send a message to that general contact, and we'll make sure you get put onto that email list.
You guys should definitely do that foraging workshop. When we were doing them before, it was great. I got to be there and listen to Gabby. Learned a lot from her, and I always learn a lot from her. So pick her brain about what she's doing and how you can use it, where to find it, how to harvest it safely, how much you're allowed to take, things of that sort.
Evan, someone wants to know if you make your own kimchi.
For this specific instance, I did not, but generally, yes, I do. I've kimchi with a lot of different things. This one just happens to be cabbage based. We've done turnips, parsnips, radishes. Little things like, as I'm mashing it down, you see me spinning the bowl. Sometimes I go through these and I realize like these little tips, if you will, of the little things I do. It helps you combine things evenly, which is exactly what I'm doing right here. Every time I rotate, instead of like doing this motion right here, I basically just keep the fork in one space and move the bowl.
Evan, someone was wondering if they might have missed whether you're using soft or firm tofu.
That is extra firm tofu. See our little mixture right here. And then we'll get our little wrappers out. These are great things if you want to. So you make this mixture. I wouldn't refrigerate and keep this for too long. I mean, I would say not an entire day. You can make it the morning that you want to use it, and then make it for dinner that night, and that works. Once you make these little dumplings, you can totally freeze them. Put them onto a tray, maybe a little bit of rice starch just so they don't stick to the tray, and then into the freezer they go. Let them completely freeze individually, and then put them in a bag and keep them in your freezer for, I would say, up to 2 weeks. Don't let them take on any ice crystals. The one thing that freezing does kind of limit is the way that you're going to cook them. Today we're going to pan fry these, but if you were to freeze these, understand that you're taking on moisture content. And so you don't want to add a bunch of moisture to a frozen product. To a product that you're going to pan sear with oil. You can imagine what water and oil does in your pan. You also see that I'm egg washing these before I put the mixture onto that. That's mostly so I don't drag the mixture all around the wrapper. So it's nice and clean with filling.
Gabby, a question for you. When is the best time to forage?
Right now, spring in New England is the best time to go try and find at least the top 10 of the seaweeds that we teach people about. It really is spring in the ocean right now. It is beautiful. You get some really, really beautiful dulse, which is one of my favorites. Lots of beautiful sugar kelp. And if you're lucky, there's some really great nori going on right now.
So for those of you, if you haven't picked up the grab bag at the library already, head in and do that. You can pick it up in the children's room at the library. There's a couple of samples from Maine Coast Sea Vegetables, as well as a foraging guide to our seaweeds that Gabby put together, and some simple recipes in there as well. So run on in and grab one of those, definitely.
Eric, can I add another little thing about the foraging? Is that okay? I was just going to say that the longer in the spring you go, the water temperature rises. So the seaweeds that you would find actually sort of die down or get really grubby. So right now the temperature of the water is really perfect. So I would venture over to the coast and see what you can find.
Getting your dumplings made here. Simply just pushing these together. These can be filled with, like I chose kimchi and tofu. You can make this, you can go meat-based out of this. Little braised pork is not a bad idea. Just wanted to join these flavors kind of as cleanly as possible. When you start adding meat products into this, you change the kind of the dimension of the flavor. And at that point, I would start making a little more robust flavored dashi. But in this instance, the sort of a little bit lighter one works out very, very well. Actually, we can bring the camera over here while I'm doing this. Kind of see this. Option so we can get that right into there. Everything's simmering. See the color's already nice and dark, very, very rich. So the kombu is already rehydrated, mushrooms are rehydrating. Some good flavor going on right there.
Evan, someone asked about what you brushed on the wrappers. That was the egg, is that correct?
Just egg. As I was saying that I chose egg today. My other options are definitely cornstarch and a little bit of water, just water. Rice starch, rice flour, and water. It's almost you're making like a slight paste out of those things if you choose to go those routes. Now you can see our little dumplings here. And these are fun. You can fold these however you want to. Turn them back and go like that, however you want to do that. Today, this will be what we're making. Okay. To that.
Gabby, someone wants to know if there's a danger of harvesting anything toxic, poisonous. They gave mushrooms as an example of something they would never do themselves. How about seaweed?
So there's about 350,000 species of seaweed, and there are none that are toxic that I know of. I do know many of them are not good to eat. The ones that are commercially successful and viable is because they do have great flavor. But rule of thumb is you don't pick anything that is off the high tide line. Obviously that's better for your compost as it's been out and things can grow in it. There's very few, unless I have never heard of anyone who had an allergic reaction to a seaweed or being poisoned by one of them. The issue really with seaweeds and safety sometimes is the amount of iodine that is in the seaweed species, which will vary. So the kelps have an awful lot of iodine. So if you have any sort of thyroid issues or you eat too much, that can make you sick. And also where you harvest is important. So you really need to make sure that you have good water quality, get in touch with Department of Environmental Services and see what their testing shows for water quality. I always say don't go harvesting at near the nuclear power plant. They do tend to hang on, absorb a lot of everything that's in the water. So sometimes heavy metals can be a concern. Around here, a lot of the main commercial stores, retail stores do a lot of their own testing for this stuff. So they do have the information on their websites. Maine Coast Sea Vegetables, for example, has a whole panel of their testing. It's expensive, but it's worth doing. And so, yeah, don't pick anything that's already rotten and on the high tide line. But overall, everything is pretty good to go.
I'm going to jump in real fast and show you this. So some beautiful dulse that Gabby brought to me today. Gorgeous color, super, super healthy. Just dress it with a little bit of oil, and then it's going to go right over the fire. We're going to grill that. That'll be one of the things that we'll put on top of our dumplings when they're done, which we're going to start searing in just a second here. So as far as searing, this oil is kind of up to you. The one thing I do not recommend is extra virgin. It's got great flavor. It has a very low smoke point, meaning you'll start seeing a lot of extra and unneeded heat coming out of the oil. The oil will break down. It will change the flavor, and it is definitely not good for frying. Things like peanut oil are good. Canola oil, things that have higher smoke points. This is actually a canola and peanut blend right here that has ginger steeped into it. So I kind of added a little bit of flavor from the beginning. Let's see, so it's changing color. I see it's getting nice and green. If you guys can smell it, it's incredible. So we're gonna let that sit on the fire for just a little bit. And we'll start searing our dumplings. Nice.
Evan, do you make your own wrappers, or are those things that you?
No, I do not. Yeah.
And are they rice or flour-based wrappers?
These are rice. These are rice flour.
Okay.
So we're stirring our dashi. So one of the things is, how long to let this steep. Again, flavor is totally up to you. Keep in mind that you'll start smelling it. It'll start to, if you can imagine this, it starts to actually smell mucky. And that's when you definitely tap out all the potential of the vegetables that are in there. And you cap your flavor at that point. Again, like you can see, I'm just trying to show you guys as much as possible. It's nice and clear through there. Not mucky, not murky. There's no sediment there. So we've done a good job with that. And start cooking our little dumplings.
What was that oil that you put on the dulse? Someone wants to know.
A ginger oil. So it's a ginger infused oil. Not necessarily available at the store, but I do make several different infused oils that I use here.
And what's the base to those?
It's canola and extra virgin. It's about 25% extra virgin, 75% canola. So I might be a little more adventurous than you as far as sticking my hands directly into the hot oil. The one thing I noticed is like it's not sizzling, it's not popping. So in my mind, it's totally safe to do what I'm doing here. This is looking fabulous. Change color to a nice vibrant green. The aroma is incredible. It smells seaweed ocean. A lot of nice stuff going on. So good. We're using like an infused oil, like right now as we're cooking in that. But I can see the ginger as we've heated it up, but we're not keeping it too high. Like this isn't deep frying. This is pan frying. And the nice thing about the rice flour here is that it's really crisp. So when you go to put this in there, unlike a lot of the like all-purpose flours or gluten-free flours, things like that, this is not going to stick in here. I also have a Teflon pan that I'm using, and obviously waiting for the oil to heat up enough. I always do one tester, kind of put it in there, make sure it's not going to stick, and then we're good to go. And you can see these guys starting to brown up nicely. Get a nice brown color on all these things right here. Going to put our carrots and our beans into there. We're just going to cook those very quickly. And then we're going to introduce the dashi into that. Put the dumplings in there, cook them just a little bit longer, and that will basically be just about what that's going to be. Delicious. We're kind of bringing things right in your face. I want you to smell these things as much as I can. It's not fair that I'm here and you guys are. I wish you were.
I'm going to answer a question real quickly, and Gabby can correct me if I'm wrong. Someone wanted to know when there would be a foraging workshop happening, and right now we don't have any scheduled in person, but Gabby has been working on a video version that will be posted on our website that you can see. And then if you're on the mailing list, we'll start notifying people when the foraging workshops take place in person.
If you aren't on the mailing list, make sure you are. You definitely want to get in touch with Gabby, and you definitely want to see those workshops. The dashi broth that we have so we talked about different stages that we could start and stop this dish. Once you make the dashi, let it cool, whether an overnight bath or sort of on room temperature and into the refrigerator. And then you can store it. It freezes really well. Keep them in the refrigerator. I'd give it, 3 to 4 days in the refrigerator to keep that great flavor. Anything past that, I would freeze it. People love the stocks and things like that. There's the ice cube tray trick. Sort of pour your stock and your dashi into the ice cube trays, freeze those, and you just take out as little or as much as you want. So vegetables cooking right there. Add our little dumplings back into there. And all the delicious broth. So we're going to let this simmer for just a minute, just to complete the cooking of the dumplings. In the meantime, we'll take our dulse, cut through that.
If anybody's already had their grab bags, the samples in there are for kelp and for dulse. There's some dulse flakes. If you want to open those up and actually take a whiff, it might actually make a little, what Evan's doing right now, come home a little bit better, I guess.
One of the great things about dealing with seaweed is that there's so much aroma, whether it's like, sorry, this is really good. You get that. It's like I get a smoky flavor off the fire. I get a nice char. You get a lot of texture going on here. Beautiful, beautiful oceanic flavor happening right there.
Gabby, someone wants to know if you have any particular beach recommendations for the best foraging spots in New Hampshire.
I do, but I keep them secret. No.
Just never tell.
So what I love about New Hampshire is we can pretty much access any of the rocky coastline. So some of the ones that I like to go to are you can't, but before I say anything, you can't forage or harvest at the state parks. So just be aware of where you are. So for some of our workshops, we've gotten permission to show people how to identify the seaweeds at Odiorn, but we're not on the park. So that's one. And then if you just go along Route 1A and you pull over at low tide, there's some really good spots. I guess it's called the Sandbox in North Beach by Cinnamon Rainbows at low tide. There's some really nice spots there. And then if you go to Fort Stark, that's the one near the CML, right, Eric? Fort Stark in Newcastle. Goat Island is also okay. And Pierce Island, I would not recommend. There's more green crabs there, but anywhere really along the really nice rocky coastline is a good spot.
Yeah, Fort Stark is a good one. All right, so I can get the camera right into this, so you guys can see you've got dumplings, right? Little vegetables in there. Sauce right there for you. And just because we started with ginger ale, we might as well end with it. Here we go. Some of that grilled dulse. Now, I'm expecting you guys to make this tomorrow and report back. That's our first thing for you. That's some dumplings in there. Throw your chopsticks in. Enjoy. So without any other time going by, we're going to jump right into our next dish. This is a version of something that I actually have on the menu right now. So I do have a little housekeeping here. So half a head of red cabbage. So in order to get to this stage right here, so I have to kind of show you this. We're going to do a little bit of magic of television with this one. So half a head of cabbage. It was cooked sous vide, which you're going to see in just a moment if you're not familiar with it, for 24 straight hours. The liquid that this was cooked with is a 50-50 blend of cabbage juice and cabbage vinegar. So those two things take, the cabbage juice is a pretty quick item to make, and the vinegar obviously takes several months to make. But it's a great thing, like when I boil a lot of cabbage in the darker months, is to keep all the scrap and whatnot. I have a nice little mother vinegar going, and we implement that and create a beautiful cabbage vinegar. So we have that there, and some of this beautiful blade of sugar kelp right there. So take this here.
Evan, someone wants to know if you use katsuobushi for anything.
I currently do not, no. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap the cabbage in the kelp, and then we're going to cook it again. So the nice thing about cabbage is, depending on the temperature that you cook it at, it can really take a lot of cooking. So this one originally was done at 70 degrees Celsius for 24 hours. So as you can see, it maintains its integrity. There, so nice little packages. So the other thing, this is great with cabbage. I love doing a lot of stuff with cabbage. Actually, cabbage and kelp are like really, really good friends in my book. But this, like, you can take the same kelp blade, wrap a piece of your favorite fish, whether it's tuna, salmon, any whitefish, ground fish, anything of that. Steam it. This is a really good thing. You get beautiful flavor off the seaweed. So we've got our little cabbage bundle here into the pouch. Goes. And then you're following me around the kitchen. Ready? Here we go. So some of you may have, I don't know what the vacuum machines are called. So I have a chamber vacuum, which you can see right here. So that's going to suck all the air out. And then we will cook that for 24 hours. Now, the next thing is, so this is the double use of the products. We made the dashi before. We're going to use that same exact dashi. Our next dish. So we have that beautiful dashi, nice broth. We're going to add an element to this. So this I do make here. I use a rice cooker, which basically means that I purchase a new rice cooker every month and a half. Because once you've done this, it basically kills it. Super great flavor. Love it. Big fan of black garlic. Also known as fermented garlic, as it is the slow process under which it goes. So we got that. So we're adding black garlic to our already established, beautifully flavored dashi. That's going to go back on the heat at a lower temperature. Right now, I'm on induction, so I've got it at 150 degrees. I'm actually going to lower this even farther to 130 and just let it slowly steep that flavor into it. Grab our cabbage out of the vacuum. Drop this right into the water bath. Again, as we said, magic of television, we're going to pretend this has been happening for several hours. So the color of the kale, the kelp, beautiful vibrant green right there. Cabbage is taking on all kinds of great flavor. So you do want to be delicate with this. Obviously, you took a lot of care to make this little package. We're going to take as much care to not ruin the package. Hang out there for mere moments. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a quick pickle. A lot of times when I do pickles, I actually use the chamber vacuum. You can call it compression pickling. It speeds up the process incredibly. But what it also does is maintains the integrity, the texture, the crunch of whatever it is that we're pickling. So in this case, we're here going back to the main coast sea vegetables. We're going to use the nori. So you can do this with fresh nori if you harvest it off the rocks. In this case, we're using the dried nori, hoping that you guys can get a hold of this from the local health food store or directly from Maine Coast Vegetables and do this. So we're going to go from dry. So if you were to harvest fresh, you could do it. However, the one thing that you take into risk is that it would break down. And we want to keep a good texture on this. So if you harvest fresh, drying, dehydrating, things of that sort, throw it in there, and then you've got a shelf-stable product for a good amount of time. So there's our dried nori. And then in here, adding to that, I have something that I, again, have to make in advance for you. So this is a pickling liquid that was made with kelp vinegar, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of salt. And then that's going to, so I've also warmed this. So I know if you've made quick pickles before, it's sort of taking like a hot or a warm pickling liquid and steeping it over the onions. And then you can have pickled onions when they're supposed to say 2 hours. So then you've got this. Note on the bag so I know where I put it. I label all that stuff that I have, so there's never any confusion. So that's not the cabbage. Again, back into our chamber vacuum. And then vacuum that's on high. If you guys have a food saver, just beware that I know that that is actually like a vacuum. It's going to suck the liquid out. So just keep an eye and make sure it doesn't come out and over. Whereas this one's a chamber vacuum, it's just going to more or less bubble the liquid and then seal it in there. While that is happening, so we'll take our little cabbage package. A bit of oil on a tray. So you can brush this on if you like. Then over to the fire. Do this on your grill, do it in a cast iron. Anything that takes on a nice sear. And hopefully you can hear that through my microphone. You can hear that nice sizzle when it hits the grill. So it's a good thing. That means you have really good contact on the grill. Your grill is hot enough, but there's nothing flaming, there's nothing smoking, which is also a good thing. A little bit of smoke is okay, but you don't want spark, you don't want flame, because you don't want to just overchar this. You also don't want that carbon all over the all over what you're trying to grill. You want a beautiful flavor, beautiful char, but you do not want all that ugly carbon.
Gabby, someone wants to know if you can harvest seaweed in the Piscataqua or whether you really need to do it in the open ocean areas.
That's a very good question. I don't. No, I think as long as you're in a good high energy part of the Piscataqua, you could. You really do need to get more to the sort of mouth of the river, though, the closest to the ocean as you can get. I do know that in Great Bay, we do get sea lettuce and gracilaria, and you can harvest there as well. But I myself prefer the coast. You get more options there.
Our nori really fast. You can see that warm liquid instantly, and the compression of the chamber vacuum instantly rehydrated this nori. And the amount of time that it takes us to grill the cabbage and steep the dashi, we have exactly what we need right here. Once you have this, this product right here, if I want to store this, today I'm going to use it right away, but if I wanted to store this, I would drop this into an ice bath and get it as cold as I can, as fast as I can. And then from there, you can keep it in your refrigerator for quite a long time. We got that little guy right there. We'll check on our cabbage.
Someone missed in the intro. The name of Evan's restaurant is Stages Restaurant. Is that
Stages?
Yep, Stages at 1 Washington in Dover, the Mill Building. Is that correct, Evan?
That is correct. We just call it Stages, but we are at the 1 Washington Mill Building right in downtown Dover. Let me remember Emma Lagasse always talked about the smell-o-vision. Well, now I know what he's talking about. I really wish we had this. So again, nice aroma, beautiful flavor. Again, look at the clarity of the broth. That's another thing that we talk about, the care that we've given to this broth. It also will really shine through in the flavor of this. Yeah. I always stick my face into the pasta smell thing, so please don't think I'm weird.
I think our cameraman, Tim, got the best deal out of this.
Yeah. So you guys can see. Ready? It's dark, right? So a nice little vibrant green. So now that we're creating a nice little char in here, but we're also steaming the cabbage inside, so we're not letting it dry out. We're adding all kinds of flavor, adding some great moisture in there to put it back on the grill for just a little bit longer. The answer to the question of how long do you keep it on the grill, again, this is something that will be up to you. How much of a char do you want? How less of a char do you want? You can move it around the hot spot, so you're just heating and steaming the cabbage and barely charring it at all. So that's totally up to you. I never like to tell somebody else how to cook. I don't like to be told how to cook. So I say, like, so much up to interpretation to you, the days, is it sunny, is it raining, what are you feeling, how much time do you have? All those sorts of things, play into it. I've got a nice little thing right here. But I want the one other part of this that I want to show you. before we get to it. It's this little guy. You can look inside here. Might not look like a whole heck of a lot other than kind of a yellowish green powder. But this is a combination of valeria, nori, kelp, golden beets, kale, and caraway seeds. This is what I like to call my late winter spice. So obviously we don't have very many spices that grow around here. So in essence of making our own flavors, our own sort of stories and ideas of the season, like we'd love to be able to describe the season by taste. And this is one of the things that to me is a great seasonal flavor. I understand that it's spring out there. I've seen it, been out in it. But other than that, we're still working with some of the flavors of winter.
I'm going to answer something real quickly here so we don't spend too much time on it. Someone sensed that that green crabs are bad in Gabby's description. Yes, they are. They're highly invasive, and we won't talk about it much, but if you go to the New Hampshire Sea Grant website, in that same fisheries tab, along with seaweed, there's a section on green crabs. Gabby does a citizen science project around green crabs. So we want to remove them. They do have some culinary value. Evan might dispute how much they have, but there are some uses for it.
The soft shell is what you want. And I can tell you about that too some other time.
It's a difficult thing for us to use culinarily. So nice color on the bottom side of the cabbage. This myself and Tim can attest. It's got a nice little aroma coming off of there. And then I do not suggest doing this with a dull knife. That out of the way. Kind of what you're dealing with on the inside. So gorgeous texture. Just trying to be very delicate, keep the kale intact as best I can.
Evan, we have an audience member who wants to know if you are a mushroom expert that they might have read about elsewhere.
I'm not necessarily, I would never call myself an expert on that. But there are a couple different varieties that I will safely and confidently harvest, but not a lot. I do work with a couple of different foragers who are very well experienced in spore printing, mushroom identification, and doing foraging classes. And they usually defer to those people for information such as that. See the texture, right? Change in. There's that pickled nori right there.
Evan, can you spread that nori out to show people that it's like very thin sheets?
I will try my best without dropping it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like saran wrap. And so that's why
we're about to see how good this camera is.
Oh yeah. So if you do find it, it is best to use it or dry it right away because it will crumble because it is so delicate. Super
delicate. You can see I'm being very, it's as delicate as I possibly can in here. I'm not, sort of manhandling it. I'm being very, very gentle with it. Here. A little bit on cabbage. So we got a little bit of that dry spice underneath. Some more of that. Nori. Just like Gabby said, this is like so delicate. If I pull this in the wrong way, I'm just going to rip it to pieces. Especially now that I'm working with it in its rehydrated form. It's even more delicate. So if you guys can think of the flavors that we have going on here between smoke and the char, the fire, the pickled nori, beautiful vinegar. But again, we kept it very, very seaweed based with the seaweed vinegar. The different dried seaweeds that are in there. Wrapping it again in kelp and putting that over the fire. And now this part right here, we have beautiful little teacup things, tea pours that we do our dashi at the table. So when this is poured in front of a guest, the aroma of it comes right up. Now can you smell the cabbage, the kelp, the dry spice is now slightly rehydrated, and then the aroma of the dashi coming in. The black garlic, I can smell the black garlic. So that, as you can see, that's our next little dish. So grilled cabbage wrapped in nori, late winter spice, pickled nori, and the black garlic dashi. This is also going to be Tim's dinner. That is what I wanted to make for that is what I wanted to make for you guys in the time that we have here tonight. Do you have any questions on anything that I know you've been asking questions throughout, and some wonderful questions too? Any questions on what I have here, why I put things together, or anything else?
Evan, do you, we saw your ginger oil at the beginning. Can you use seaweed in oils as well?
Yes, you definitely can. Actually, make that as well, but go from the dehydrated. Again, if you harvest fresh, excellent, dry it out, and then bring it into the oil to slowly steep it. And as far as how much, whether it's ginger or seaweed that you want to put into your infused oils, it's more than you think. In order to get a really, really strong flavor. Because even when you're making it, you'll smell it like, okay, that's ginger, or in this case, that's seaweed. And you get it. Once you go to use it, either on another product, on your salads, or anything of that sort, it kind of dampens and you almost lose that flavor. So I definitely err on the side of a stronger flavored or more aromatic oil than you might think.
Someone wants to know if you have to rinse the seaweed, or what sort of cleaning process you need to use when you harvest.
Absolutely. It's almost like a triple wash thing, they kind of tell you about on lettuces. There's all sorts of fun little like other plants and little sea creatures on the seaweeds when they're harvested. So from there, you almost go from one big, picture a big bucket of water. So you almost flush it and bring it up, and then flush it and then bring it up, and then go to another one. And I do that. It's like in the 3 separate washes to get it as clean as I possibly can.
Can I interject in there for a sec?
Yes.
On that, so it's very cold, fresh water, and that should clean off anything that's marine, including any sort of bacteria that like to hang out in there. If you're not quite ready to use it, I wouldn't rinse it yet, and certainly don't store it in cold, fresh water, because it'll degrade the seaweed. So it's a quick rinse, like Evan said, in a cold wash. And then if you do that, then and then put it back in the fridge, pat it dry so that it doesn't have any more of the little freshwater droplets on it.
Yeah, and again, if your intent is not to use it immediately, I would dry it. I would that way that you save it, because you can rehydrate it, but keeping it dry is always a safe way.
I know the answer here. I'm going to ask this. Someone wants to know if says these look really wonderful. Would you consider serving these types of dishes at your restaurant?
Yes, I'm going to make kind of one of each dish. The first one, the what do you call it, the dumplings and whatnot. This is something that I would make at home. This is actually, I've made a very similar dinner to this at home. And then the cabbage dish that we have here actually is on our menu right now. So I wanted to give you something a little bit of back and forth.
Evan, anybody else? I was going to ask you about the kelp vinegar.
Yeah.
How do you? How do you do that? I didn't actually know that you could make vinegar out of kelp.
It's a great, and again, like, so starting, like, it all goes to dried, so because the liquid obviously would slowly hydrate it. So I have a mother, SCOBY, that I've got. It's actually probably about 7 years old now. And then from there, a little bit of white vinegar, and then you put your seaweed into it. And then you just keep an eye on its age, its smell. Obviously, we're not going to leave the kelp in it for too long. But once we've extracted all the flavor into it and established the good bacteria there, then the vinegar is done and ready, and it's ready to be shelved. But yeah, it's a really cool. Actually, there's an interesting way. If you think about it, right? You can make you can make seaweed oil, you can make seaweed vinegar, and then you got yourself a nice little seaweed vinaigrette, which you can bond or rather emulsify with Irish moss. There's your emulsifier.
Gabby, someone wants to know about the future of the seaweed market and whether it's taking hold in the United States.
So we're working really hard on that. The problem right now is that in the United States, we don't have processing where we need it. So I do believe that it's an emerging and growing market, but it can't just be for culinary purposes. So I think it's going to be a more of a diversified market, but it's definitely growing. Maine is definitely sort of knocking it out of the park, and then Alaska and California are as well. So I do believe there's a future.
If I can jump into the back end of that as well, speaking from the culinary side, is that I have friends with restaurants all around the country, and those of us that are on the coasts definitely use quite a bit of it, which is awesome. But again, we're a very small percentage of the overall culinary population, or just the population in general. So it's definitely, if you guys are able to implement that into your diets, then that itself helps grow that industry, like Abby was saying.
Any suggestions on using the dulse flakes that came in their sample bag, Maine Coast dulse flakes?
Sprinkle it on everything.
Yeah. I know Gabby likes it on her popcorn.
And ice cream, remember?
That's right. Yeah, makes a great ice cream. Sort of seasoning to the ice cream is a really good thing. Popcorn. What's another good? I mean, you put in a lot of things. Like when you say you take a piece of as I say, like some barbecue ribs, sprinkle it with that, and you'll be amazed at the flavor change that creates.
I love it on my salads on the top. Kind of gives a little crunch to the salad. Evan, someone wants to know again your spice mix that you used.
Yeah, so it's dried nori, valeria, sugar kelp, caraway seed, golden beet, and kale.
Any recommendations on how to go about drying the seaweed?
Say that again?
Any recommendations on how to go about drying the seaweed that you collect if you want to dry some?
You want to take that, Evan?
Yeah, sure. So I can tell you how I do it. Is that in the dehydrator is actually if you put in how much you have. So I have two ways. I have kind of a smallish commercial dehydrator. You just lay it out on trays and then set the temperature to about 120, 125 degrees Fahrenheit. I also have a much bigger one, which I actually set to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I can do larger batches of it. But that's what I do. I also put it up onto a cake rack just to let air circulate all the way through it. So you're not putting seaweed, such as, you're not putting something like this flat onto a tray, because as soon as it dries, it's going to stick to this tray. So if you put it on a cake rack, you get great air circulation.
Gabby, someone wants to know if the Portsmouth Brewery is doing their Selkie beer this year, and if you know when it will be. Or maybe you can describe what it is.
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I don't know if we have been able to grow enough kelp to harvest. Right now during COVID and so on, we've been sort of out of capacity, so I'm not entirely sure if that's going to happen. But in the past, we did do the Selkie beer, and it usually comes around, I believe, midsummer. And so if it does come out, then it'll be around then. So keep an eye out. I'm not entirely sure yet.
Evan, I don't know that if you can answer this one. Maybe this is for the whole collaborative here, but will there be more of these sessions with Evan teaching us recipes?
As long as I can convince Gabby that it's still a good idea, yes.
Maybe green crabs next.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, we definitely like to keep these going.
So here's interesting. This is, I think this speaks to the power of this virtual world we live in these days. We have someone living in Iowa, and they have seaweed garnishes called salty fingers at a local restaurant. Do you have any idea what seaweeds those might be? Is that a common vernacular? Does anyone know?
I'm gonna take a guess that it might be codium, which is around here is an invasive species. And it really sort of does, around here we call it dead man's fingers. But when you dry them out, it does look like little pieces, little fingers and so on. So that's sort of my guess, but otherwise I don't know. Evan?
No, I'd go with you on that. I'm not really sure what that could be.
They should send in a
hopefully.
picture.
Yeah. Hopefully it's a tasty item.
Yeah.
Gabby, any advice about kelp or other seaweeds in a compost pile?
Oh, it's so good for your compost. So the only thing I would say is you can go, it's not necessarily harvesting, but you can get some down at the high tide line. Yep, that's it. That's codium. But you can go at low tide and go to the highest high tide line and grab a garbage bag full and then spread it on your garden. The only thing I would say first is sort of mulch it up a little bit and rinse it a little bit, because you don't necessarily want all of the salt from the ocean on your garden, but otherwise all of the nutrients are amazing. I would highly recommend it.
Could you repeat for someone, you mentioned information from the Environment DES on safety in seaweed and where to harvest. Could you mention how to go about getting that information?
We have our foraging tips from online. There's not very much to go on, really. You go to New Hampshire Fish and Game and ask them what the rules and regulations are. But really quickly, you are in New Hampshire, and it depends on the state that you're in. But in New Hampshire, essentially, you are not allowed to harvest at night. You're not allowed to harvest above the high tide line. And you can't sell it across state lines, and you can harvest 3 bushels per person per day. And so essentially their safety is go with a buddy and don't go at night. And definitely check out what the water quality testing in it. That's the water department at New Hampshire Environmental Services. So you can just go to their website.
We have someone who's familiar with the seaweeds in the Philippines, saying that they have seaweeds there they use that have branches, and are wondering if there are any similar seaweeds here.
Branches? I'm not sure what that means. I can't.
That's all I have to go on. So maybe the person can clarify in their questions. So I'm not seeing a lot of other questions roll in, and we're actually past our official finishing time. I'm hoping before we go, maybe Evan, could you, as we're wrapping up, kind of give a final description of those dishes? And we did have a few people looking for clarification on all the ingredients. So maybe as you go through the dishes, just sort of point out the various ingredients.
Absolutely. So we'll put them all front and center so we can look at them right there. So we'll start with the first one. This is something that I would more so make at home. So you've got dumplings with kimchi and tofu that are seared in ginger oil, grilled rice, carrots, soybeans or edamame. And then the broth underneath is dashi, made with dried sugar kelp or kombu. Some smoked shiitake mushrooms in that broth as well. And then on the other guy, we've got red cabbage that was cooked for 24 hours in a combination of cabbage juice and cabbage vinegar. Then it was wrapped in kelp and then cooked again, sous vide, and then put over the fire to char and finish steaming. On top of that, a little powder, I'm just going to pick it up here. A little powder here, that's the combination of 3 different seaweeds, kale, golden beet, and caraway. And then that is on top of pickled nori, quick pickled nori, which is done with nori vinegar there. And then the broth here, we use that same broth from the dumpling dish, but we steeped black garlic into that, made it a little more robust, a little more earthy, a little more funky, and put it with the cabbage.
So I'd like to let everyone know that if you would like to find out more about these seaweed-focused events, remember that you can go to the fisheries page at New Hampshire Sea Grant website. And also we'll have recordings of tonight's event if you want to rewatch it and pick up some of those tips, or you have someone you know that couldn't join us and wants to watch it. It'll be posted on the YouTube channels of both the Dover Public Library and New Hampshire Sea Grant. So if you go to either of the websites, there are YouTube channels there. And finally, I'd like to give special thanks to Andy Dolph at UNH's Learning Space Technologies for his technical support of the webinar. And special thanks to Tim Briggs, the Science Communication Specialist at New Hampshire Sea Grant, who handled the video production and the filming tonight and got to smell all the good food. So he got the good deal out of it too. So, but again, thanks everyone for coming. We had a great turnout. Thank you again, Evan. And we'll definitely, we'll talk about maybe some more of these in the future. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.